Wonderful. So I'm Lindsay Needis. I'll be presenting the webinar today. We'll be talking about user basics in Contrail. We'll be taking it way back to the beginning and looking at Contrail from the perspective of the user application. Now, for those of you who have done this before, we've seen that the user side of Contrail is that read-only environment where it is great for viewing data. It is great for, the general public to be able to interact with your Contrail page and your data, but it does not have access to a lot of those heavy-duty administrative features that we've come to know and love. So let's take a look through a couple of things. I'm starting out on the main landing page, and one of the great things about today's webinar is that you can all see and do everything that I'll be doing today yourself. I'll be doing this all through demonstration.onerain.com, which is our public-facing demonstration page. We've got that open to anybody so you can see what's going on. You'll be able to walk through all of the same features that I've done today. And we can even confirm I am not logged in at all today. I can click on the profile button and you'll see that I am just logged in as our general guest user, which is to say I am not logged in at all. So splendid. When we first come to that demonstration page, we are on the home page. Now this is really where you can go to town with the branding for your particular agency. In the upper left-hand corner, you'll see that there are two different icons that kind of actually look a lot like one icon. There is on the left-hand side, this is usually an icon-based logo. Our general guidelines is that this should be no more than 70 by 70 pixels. Then the second one is a text-based logo, and that should be no more than 70 by 140 pixels. And the reason why we have those two different logos broken up and on the smaller side of things is to make sure that Contrail continuously is accessible and responsive for a wide variety of different devices and different screen types. If I change the size of my page, you'll see that we've got different, everything just changed with the responsiveness of the page, the secondary logo just disappeared, and everything scales to fit the size of the screen and the window that I have. And what that means is that's really great for if you're looking at Contrail on your phone or your tablet, for example. You should have all of the exact same functionality as you would if you were looking on your desktop. Then on the main part of the homepage here, you'll see that there is a white block, and that comprises the customizable aspect of what you can put on your homepage. We've got, our general homepage here for our stuff. It's, it describes what this this Contrail setup is. It has some links, some menus to different places, some images. So really, when you're logged in as an admin, you can make changes to this homepage to fit whatever you want as branding for your agency. Then finally on this homepage back at the top, there isn't one in place right now, but you do have the ability to color this main back panel across the top, this main strip, or you can upload an image in there as well. For our demonstration, we opted to leave that as the default white simply because it presented a cleaner view for everyone. So because this is a customizable text block on the homepage, I won't be jumping into all of the different links that we have in here, just because this is going to vary on an agency by agency basis and can be changed per user. So I won't spend much time there. Instead, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the other features that we have in here real fast. And then we'll go over to the data side of what we can do on this user interface. So first thing I'm going to point out is our news module. This is one of two buttons that will disappear if there is not any content published there. So if I click on news, we can see that there are two different news articles that are currently published here. I can open them up, see what's been posted. News is oftentimes used as a place where you can post updates about your system that are available to the general public. We've seen clients use this to indicate that they're aware of an issue at a specific gauge site and that they'll be outperforming maintenance on such and such day. We've seen other agencies use it to describe that we've had to take out specific sites out of service because there's been vandalism or they've been hit by a car or other things. So, just a way that you can convey that you're aware of something to the public if you have this as a public facing page. Although it's not in place here, these news articles can be pinned to the homepage as well. Neither of these are currently pinned, but they would be indicated as such with a little push pin icon next to the article. And then you would also on the main homepage see that as a blue text box at the top of the page. And that's a great way, if you've got something that you want people to see front and center right as they come to that page, you can pin a news article, and that's a great way of doing that. The other option that we have, or the other module that we have that disappears on the user side if there are not any, if there's not any content published there, would be dashboards. If I click on it, well, I see the button there, so obviously there are dashboards available for you to see. And on our demonstration page, a lot of our dashboards are examples of different widget types so that you're able to see what those different widget types look like and what those different options are. And these cover a wide variety of all of our different current widget types. With that said, we also have a couple dashboards that follow more of our traditional dashboard setup. So for example, we've got one that's dedicated to a road status dashboard, and this kind of describes in the general Tampa Bay area the status of the roads, if they're open, if they're closed, if there's water on the road. It also will show things like, are there any alarms that are currently active there? An inset of the map, text box, etc. We'll cover dashboards much more in depth in one of our upcoming webinars, but just wanted to walk through that. We've got this list of dashboards. The icon up there will not show if you don't have any dashboards that are available to the general public. The list in which they are shown is something that is ordered by the system administrator and can be filtered out by particular categories here. So if I want to look at only the dashboards that are summary dashboards, I can select that category and we'll look at only the summary dashboards there. So the final option that I want to show for non-data related features within the user interface for general users is the bookmarks. There are two different types of bookmarks in Contrail. We have shared bookmarks and we have personal bookmarks. Shared bookmarks will be available to anybody who is able to see this user application side. So we can see, for example, here I've got bookmarks to our Contrail help page and to our One Rain Company page. Since I'm not logged in, I will not see any personal bookmarks. Those are reserved for those folks who have a user account in Contrail and can log in, and then they can create personal bookmarks which are associated with just their user account and only they can see those. So those are different options there. And after this, I will log in just to show a couple of user settings that can be modified from this user application instead of needing to go into the administration environment. So we'll come around to that at the very end. Wonderful. So let's go back to the home page. And then from there, I am going to navigate over to sites. So as many of you know, sites in Contrail are a specific location that is collecting data. Sites have coordinates, a latitude and a longitude that define where it is physically located. And sites also have sensors, which are going to be your individual data types that are being brought into Contrail. So in looking at this sites list, it is showing me the list of sites by the default view for the guest user in this account. I can change that list of sites by switching over the view here. If I go all sites, we can see many different views are available. I can switch over to a view that looks at sites only in Colorado, one that looks at only SNOTEL collection sites. So many different options for those different views. Views in general serve as different collections of sites, regardless of how they're being actually brought into Contrail. So it doesn't matter if a site comes from HADS, from METAR, from the USGS, or from your own proprietary network. You can put all of those into one view or only select sites into one view and organize that in a way that makes sense for your agency. So I'm going to switch back to all sites because that makes a little bit more sense for today's presentation. Another thing that I can do here is filter out by the sensor type. So if I choose a specific sensor type here, what it will do is filter down this list of sites to show only those that have a sensor that is defined with that sensor type at that site. So for example, let's switch to stage. If I look at stage, well, my list has just gotten shorter now, and we're looking at only sites that have a stage sensor that is defined. It's also showing me the most recent report and the timestamp associated with that report. Furthermore, from that, I'd like to point out a couple of the icons that some of you may have noticed on the right-hand side that indicate the status of these different sites and sensors. The alarm clock, as I'm hovering over it, it kind of gives me a tip here. That indicates that this sensor is timed out, which means that there have not been any valid reports received at this site in at least 24 hours. Now, that 24-hour range is something that is configurable by a system administrator, so I won't go so far to say always assume that it's 24 hours. I would just say the clock means it is timed out. The next one down, we have a red alarm bell, which indicates, as you've guessed, that there is an active alarm at that site. From the user side of Contrail, it is a privilege level that can be granted to see alarms and alarm data when shown at the specific sensor or in a dashboard. However, general users are not able to retrieve data about said alarm. You know, what was the delivery that was sent out, what the criteria for that alarm is. It will really just be the title for that alarm and when it was triggered and potentially when it was acknowledged, depending on your settings for that. Then another one that I'd like to point out here, we have the out of service or maintenance mode icon in the form of a yellow wrench. And this indicates that a sensor or a site has been marked or toggled into that out of service status mode. And that means that any data that's being received there is going to be marked as MM and invalidated. This is particularly useful, you know, if somebody is going to go out and perform maintenance at your site, or if you have to take some of those sites out of operation for the winter, for example. I know out here in Colorado, a lot of our local networks pull many of their rain gauging sites and their stage gauging sites out of operation in the winter so that they don't freeze. So that might be something you'll see more frequently depending on the region that you are in. All right, so we've got that. If I want to see everything again, I can revert that back to all for my sensor type. And finally, I can use this find bar to start searching in the list if there's something in particular I want to look at. So if I wanted to look at Frog Creek, I can start typing and it will live filter out the sites as I'm typing. So from here, what I'd like to do is take a look at a couple of the sites. So let's go to St. John's River near Sanford and look at a couple things there. So first thing that stands out to me is the sensors panel here. Personally, I like having it in this tile view. However, if you do like a more simplified spread, you can view this as a list instead, which will just give you the name of those sensors and the most recent. I like the tile first for the color for visual interest and also because they show a sparkline plot, which gives kind of that context for how the data has changed over the last 7 days. Two of the sensors at this site have been out of service and have been for a while now, so we'll be ignoring those two for right now. But we can see two other sensors, flow rate and stage. Both of them are reporting regularly, most recent being an hour ago, and having the most recent report listed here as well with 1.83 feet and 1,460 cubic feet per second. Also on this site page, we've got an example of where this particular site is located on the map, gives you a little bit of that spatial context for what this is, where this is located, any features around this. And this map uses the default base map that is configured for that general guest user. Notes and images can also be added at the site level, or as we'll see, at the sensor level. These notes and images are something that are configured and uploaded from the administration side, but can be presented on the user side as well. One of these notes is a link back to the host USGS site. This image actually is being pulled from outside of Contrail, being pulled from the National Weather Service, and shows their hydrograph as well as their thresholds for this particular site. So that's cool. We can, as you can see, yeah, we can pull in images from outside of Contrail, or you can upload your own images right into Contrail as well. So let's go ahead, we'll take a look at the stage from here and kind of drill in a little further. And so this is our stage details page. It gives a couple of quick statistics at the top. What is the most recent? What is the maximum value? What is the minimum value? And the time period that these all refer to is going to be the time period selected in the date range picker here. This is showing me 2 days by default, but if I click on it, I can open it up and select the range of my choosing. I'll do the last 7 days just to bring in a bit more data. The graph below this is a graph that auto scales to the data that's being displayed. So right now the range of data is looking pretty small simply because we're also looking at thresholds that have been defined, and the graph is scaling to fit those thresholds in. You can find more information about what those values are down below that. If there were a description, that would also display here. And if I don't really want to look at the thresholds right now, I can simply turn them off by clicking the thresholds button, and the graph will auto scale to accommodate just the data feed now. So now we're looking, yep, that's 1 week's worth of data. If I want markers for the individual reports, I can turn those on. Not so great with my 7-day spread here. Let's switch that back to the last 2 days. Okay, there we go. We've got, again, yep, looks still pretty cluttered, but I can hover over any of those data points on the graph and it will snap to the closest reading to that time and show me the value as well as that timestamp. So that's one way that you can look at that data. Otherwise, we can scroll down to the data table and this will describe the data further, resulting in a couple of timestamps and a couple of values. This first large timestamp that we see, this is going to be referred to as the reported time in Contrail. This is the time that the data report was actually taken. So we'll see that the report is associated with this time and is separate from the receive time. The receive time refers to when that data report was actually received and noted in the Contrail database. So that receive time is not always the same thing as the report time, and that really depends on the protocol of the data that you're receiving. For example, this is a USGS site, so there is going to be a little bit of latency in between that receive time and that report time because we are not getting that feed instantaneously. However, with something like an Alert 2 data feed, that latency is going to be in the form of minutes to seconds. We really don't expect much of a discrepancy between those at all because it's such a fast process to get the data from the field into the software. And with things like Legacy Alert, you won't see latency at all because the timestamp that we associate with the alert report is actually created when that alert report is received. So as I've mentioned, latency is going to be the difference between the receive time and the report time. For example, here, if I hover over the receive time, we'll see that that came in at 12:46, whereas the report time was 12:30, resulting in 16 minutes and some change for latency. Now looking at the data itself, we've got 2 different data reports here. The main one that we're looking at with the engineering units is going to be referred to as the finished value. This is after any calibrations and conversions have taken place, and this will be what is graphed, what is used to trigger alarms. This is going to be what you see in most places in Contrail. For further reference, however, is the raw value. This is the smaller value in parentheses, and this is the actual value that we receive in the report. Again, since this is USGS, we're not going to see a difference between those because we are not performing any conversions or calibrations to transform the raw data into a finished data point. But looking back at, alert data, that's going to be something different. We're going to get an integer value that needs to be transformed into engineering units using a slope and maybe an offset and a reference in order to get that into a more human readable term. So for your general users, or if you're displaying this to the general public, you can actually hide that raw value if you don't want to confuse people. That can be turned on and off with the raw value button. And viewing the raw value is actually a privilege level associated with accounts. So that's one way that administrators can change what their general users can see. In addition to that, we see below the data value our data quality tag. This indicates what validation this has passed. So in hovering over this, I see that this is good data marked as good. In general, all green tags that start with A will be good, valid data, whereas we also have reports, or data quality tags rather, that are MX for surpassing the maximum allowed value, MN is the minimum. Also, for example, positive delta is PD, negative delta is ND, and then maintenance mode is going to, or that out of service, is going to be MM. So again, that is one more thing that you can hide from your general users or can restrict your general users from seeing by turning off the data quality button and adjusting the user privileges for your guest account or your general users. When I turned off that data quality, you'll also see that that did hide the received time and the data latency. So this is the absolute most basic view you can get just looking at when the data was received and what the finished value is for that. Now from here, you can download data. This will be downloaded reflecting the time period that's been selected in the date range picker at the top. If I click on the download button, you'll see that we've got 3 options for different formats, and that will download and include raw values and data quality depending on the privilege levels of the user accessing that. In general, that download is going to be restricted to about a year. That will vary on a server by server basis depending on whether we are hosting your server, whether you are hosting your server. We do restrict it to 1 year, however, to preserve the efficiency of your server and make sure that many people are not just pounding the database and constantly asking for data in that mechanism. That 1 year limit, however, does not necessarily have to be the last calendar year up until today. It can be any year that you have in the database for your data. So from there, I want to take a look at our Multigraph page, which opens up a few additional options. So let's click on the Multigraph button, which was that green little graph button. And on this page, we have the ability to graph multiple points of data and compare that in many different ways. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new sensor to this by clicking on Add. And then I can change my view if I'd like for which view I want to be looking at. This works just fine for me. We're going to choose this Alligator Creek site. And then to be consistent, I want to also look at stage here. So now that we've refreshed, I click the Add button. We see now there are going to be 2 sensors that will be graphed. I can click Graph, and now we've got those 2 sensors. So looking at this, this is a little cluttered. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the thresholds so I can just see these 2 data feeds. If I want to turn on thresholds individually, I can open up the thresholds bar and turn them individually on if I only want to look at one in particular, or I can turn them all off. Or if I want to turn a data feed off of here or data reports off of here, I can simply turn that off as well to look at just one at a time. Now that we're looking at this, you can see that these are being graphed on the same axis based on their sensor type. These are both stage sensors that are going to be grouped in that sense. However, if you're looking at multiple things, you've got a stage and you've got a stage secondary, or, a second pressure transducer or a different type of gauge at that same site, you can group them by units instead. So for example, this is measuring in feet. So as long as another site or another sensor is using feet as the units of measurement, you can group it by that instead of sensor type. I don't have a good example for this right now, but if this will, like I said, this is particularly useful if you're looking at things that measure the same units. So things like temperature and, air temperature and dew point, your primary and secondary stage gauges, things like that. Great option there. If I want to, I can also look at not just the data points, but the latency associated with those data points. So I can turn that on instead and see, wow, okay, that is really, really complex on the eyes. Let's turn one of those off. Super. So now I can see that there is a pretty regular pattern of latency associated with this St. John's River site. It's at its maximum of about an hour of latency, and it usually has a minimum of about 16 minutes latency. Although this pattern looks kind of alarming, this is actually what we expect for a USGS site, because even though it shows 15-minute data, that data is only available to us once an hour. So even though this looks busy, looks a little alarming, this is what we expect for USGS. So I'm going to turn that latency back off and look at just the data. Looks like that forgot my settings, so we're going to just turn those right back off, turn the data back on, and there we go. So what else can we do with this? Well, let's say that I don't like the way this is spread out. This auto scaling axis just isn't doing it for me. I can switch over to the options and I can create my own axis parameters. So instead of an automatic scaling of 1.5, let's put that at 0. And then for a maximum, let's put that at 10. So now we have something standard. This is great if you're trying to standardize this against something else. If I want, I can position the axis from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. Just different settings that I can turn on and look at in different ways. If I want, I can also, let's see, I want to revert that back to normal. I can also turn on the data quality tags and look at invalid data on this. So one of the things I said previously was that only finished valid data is going to show up on your graphs, trigger alarms, etc. Well, now we also have the ability to show invalid data points on the graph for your reference, just in case you want to see where those might be falling. Use that as a comparison to see if that actually should be valid data. So if I turn data quality to on, you'll see that my legend has changed a little bit, and that now we can see that any data quality tags would show as red, any out of service points would show as orangish yellow, and the graph really hasn't changed too much. And that's probably on me for choosing a not so great example, but if there were any invalid data points here, they would show as points outside of the trend line. So you would see those points, they wouldn't alter the trend line at all, but you would be able to at least have those for a comparison against the data in place. Let's see, other things that we can do. So now I'm going to take a step back. Let's go ahead and look at this stage sensor, just this stage sensor. So now I'm back on the sensor's details page here, looking at the same thing just from a different point of view. Looks great to me. So my next step that I'm going to do is kind of transition away from the sites aspect of things, the sites and the sensors, and switch over to the map view within Contrail. So I'm going to go ahead, nav bar, click on map, and this takes me to our pan and zoom map in Contrail. So this is going to operate like most of the other maps that you've interacted with lately. You can use your mouse to scroll out and scroll in to zoom, and click and drag to pan around, change your view, and also interact with the data on this map. A few features before we talk about that data itself. The timestamp in this upper left-hand corner refers to the last time this map was refreshed and pulled in data. In the background, this map refresh rate will depend on how your server is deployed. So the map is the only page on the user side that will automatically refresh for you. Anywhere else, if you're looking at a site in particular, a sensor in particular, dashboards, you will have to manually refresh the page, or your dashboard will have to have an automatic refresh configured by your system administrator. You can also use the buttons here to zoom in and zoom out, and we do have a show location option. It will ask your browser for permission to use your location. I'm not going to click it because we're looking at the data in Florida and it will just drag me over to Colorado, so that's not helpful right now. But that's also an option in there if you want to find the closest site to your particular location. So in viewing the data right here, what we're looking at is all of the sites that are present in the default view. So that default view for the map is USGS sites, and we're looking at those USGS sites in Florida. I can switch that view by opening the menu. I can look at sites in Colorado. I can switch that over and look at a site near the Mohawk River in New York. We can switch to a grouping of only METAR sites. Okay, there looks to be only one METAR site, cool. So, and then there's a group of all sites, and I think that takes us back to Florida again. Opening up that view panel will also give us the option to look at all sites, including out of service sites, or we can turn that off and turn the out of service sites off, and on the next refresh, that map should hide those out of service sites. We also have a legend that describes the different icons here, which are really site status icons. We get a lot of questions if these icons can be configured or changed, or the colors or the shapes. And at this time, unfortunately, these are hard-coded into our software because they do show our specific statuses of these different sites and sensors. The green circles mean that a site is operational. An operational site is a site that has at least one sensor that is still reporting data regularly. Out of service sites, we've talked about this one. Those out of service sites have been marked as out of service or in maintenance mode. And same goes for timed out. Although I don't see any timed out sites here right now, that means that there are no if you're looking at the sites, there are no sensors there that have received a valid report in the timed out period. And then finally, if your user account has view alarm privileges, you'll also see icons for alarm status, whether that's an acknowledged alarm or an unacknowledged alarm. So these are, we're looking at all sites right now. So if I hover over, let's see, we had used Alligator Creek as an example before. We'll continue using that one. If I just hover over it, it gives me a quick kind of just quick details. What is the site name? What is the site ID? And if it's in a state of alarm. If I click on that, that will open a menu showing all of the sensors at that, the most recent report, the timestamp, as well as links to look at, if I want to look at a graph for stage here, I can click on that graph and it will give me an inset of the last 2 days here and kind of describe what's going on there, along with thresholds if those have been configured. I'm going to switch that back over. Let's look at just that site again. I can also look at, I'm on my sensors list right now. If there are any alarms here, this gives me details about that alarm that we're seeing. So this is a road closed alarm that is configured on the road status sensor here. It triggered 11 days ago and it was automatically acknowledged, but it's still in a not clear state because the data indicates that it should not be clear yet. This icon here for alarms will also only show up if there is an active alarm at that site. So that's cool. That's another one of those kind of magic features that we have so that if there isn't something active there, it's hidden away. We can also see if there are any images or notes uploaded to that site. No images, looks like this does have some notes, however, linking to other locations. And then finally, if I click this green site button, it will take me to that site details page we've come to know and love. So let's go back to the sensors. I can do the same thing here. These green sensor buttons will take me away to those sensor details pages. Or if I want, I can view sensor data on the map itself by filtering out by sensors. Click on the sensor tile here, and currently it's showing me all sensor types, but I can filter that out. Let's say I want to look at rain increment in the last 48 hours. Looks like there was some rain in the general Tampa area, so that's cool. We can see what those most recent values were, as well as in hovering over it, it tells me the timestamp associated with that. Rain increment's kind of a hard example though, because we do have some extra background forces at play with rain increment. So let's switch to stage here. I like stage as a general example. It's something that we're pretty used to in this point. So again, we're looking at those most recent values that were reported. We can see now that there is one site that's been timed out in the central part of Florida here, hasn't reported for about a week. But now we've also filtered out and we're only showing those sites that have a stage sensor configured, similar to that list we were looking at previously. Hovering over any of these now will give me the most recent value, the timestamp, and clicking on it will open that graph for me again. And similar to our graph page, I can hover over the data trend line and we'll see that most recent, that closest report rather to where you're hovering and the timestamp associated with that. Different things we can switch through from the graph view to an images view, look at any thresholds that have been defined as well. So an example here, we were looking at St. John's before. We've got those thresholds defined. If I want to see what those values are, I can click on thresholds and it will give me what those actual defined parameters are. Sweet. So talking about thresholds, one of the options when you're filtered by sensor type is to show thresholds on the map. So when I turn thresholds to yes, this legend expands. We see a bunch of different colors. And effectively, for any sensor that has thresholds configured, it will look to those values and compare that against the most recent value. And the tag will change color based on that value. So an example of that being at Sweetwater Creek, this tag has turned yellow. So if I click on that and open that, we can see the data is above the threshold here, which is the action stage threshold according to our legend. If I want to see exactly what that is, I'm suspecting it's probably pretty close to 11. And oh, well, when I hover over it, I can see that it is 11, or I can switch to the thresholds tab and see that action stage is indeed 11 feet here. And I can go to any of these that have changed color. So Blackwater Creek here, there's an unacknowledged alarm here. I can also see that this is a major flood stage at 60 feet and that this is currently reading at 73.15 feet. So thresholds on the map are great because it gives you that kind of at a glance status update. I can look at this map and instantly see, okay, we've got at least one that's in an action stage, one location in a major flood stage, two that have hit a monitor stage, and one that's at channel bottom. And that's just, at a glance, I can get that general reading of what the situation is. And so I love having thresholds and these color-coded tags specifically for that. We do have some other options that aren't showing up on my map here because they are not configured for this particular client, but we did recently add support for historical data and for statistics. And these are both limited to a client-by-client basis. If this is something you're interested in learning more about, please reach out to us at Contrail Support, and we can talk more about what options we have for you in there. But those, if you do have those enabled, would also show up under this options menu. So I realized I skipped over one tab. This is the sites tab, and I skipped it because it was pretty self-explanatory, I think. If you click on, we've got a list of all of the sites in this view. If we click on a particular one, it will take me to that site and open up the dialog there. So that way we're able to easily see what's going on. It's a nice way of finding things, especially if you have a very large network or you're looking at a network that you're not very familiar with all of the sites. So that way you don't have to open each individual one just to figure out what the site ID, what the site name is, and it's a faster way of finding what you're looking for. So another cool thing that we can do with maps is change the base map. So right now we have a standard one in place, but we do have many different options available. Sometimes having a USGS satellite background might give you better context for what's going on. And so these are things that can either be changed on an instance by instance each time you look at a map, or they can be changed for each user to set their own preferred default. So right now, this is my USGS satellite layer. I can look at USGS satellite with boundaries and features named. Our default is typically either the standard or the light options, just so that we have that greater contrast between the sites and the actual base map, but to each their own. Everybody prefers something different. We also, for additional value on this map, you can add in different layers and bring in layers from your own department. If you have a GIS department that creates layers that you can show on maps, we can bring those into Contrail. From public sources as well, such as the National Weather Service, that's also an option. In this case right now, we have a USGS hydrography layer that's on by default. If I turn that off, you'll see that that map got a little less detailed. So I like that USGS hydrography layer just to add a little bit more information to what I'm looking at. We also, by default, have a NOAA radar layer that's included with our Contrail instances. This is a third-party layer. We're pulling this in from the National Weather Service. This is not a Contrail product, but we do include it for our North American customers, for our US customers. If I turn that on, I can see, oh, a couple patches just popped up over Florida. If I zoom out further, we'll see that lovely storm that just passed through the south. And looking at the layer itself, I can see that there's a little clock next to it, which indicates that this layer does have time controls. So if I turn on time controls at the top of the layers menu, that will open up my time controller, I guess, and I can animate this layer. If I press play, it's going to do one pass to buffer, and then it should start moving more reliably after that first pass. And if I decide, that speed, not for me, I want it to move a little faster, I can change that speed. I can have it go up to 5 times faster, and it shows the timestamp associated with that layer there. So this is available only on layers that have been marked as time enabled, depending on whatever source you're pulling them from. In this demonstration, though, we can also see options. For example, if I want to look at the National Weather Service watches and warnings, I can turn on the current warnings. It turns our nation into a wide variety of lovely colors. And what this is a layer that does have, that is interactive in that if I click on any of those warning areas, I can pull additional information from that. So for example, I clicked on one of the yellow tiles and found that this is a flash flood watch. I think it was issued by the Jacksonville Weather Forecast Office, and I can find information about how the range over which this is valid as well. So a lot of these different layers are really great because you can bring in so much more information into the map and show much more context than just your data on the map. Show it all in one place, get more details, and really make this a useful tool for you. And this, right now, this has all been just on the user side of Contrail. This user side is something that can be opened up to the general public if that is something your agency wants. What we do is we will enable a guest account effectively, which has very, very basic privilege levels, and they can view the data here without getting onto that admin side. So I'm going to take one quick change here, and back at my homepage, let's look at what happens for a logged in user while you're looking at this user application. So I'm going to go ahead, log myself in. Awesome. So really not too much has changed. We can see that I now do have the ability to switch over to the administration interface if I would like. I'm not going to. What I'd like to show instead is different user settings that can be managed from the user side. So I can see now I've switched to my logged in user account instead of the guest account. If I click on my name, I can see a summary of all of my settings, and I can make changes to my own settings without having to go into the administration environment. This is, again, you cannot create other users. This is just self-management from this portal. But if I want to update my email address, change my phone number, or even change my time zone or my base map, I can do that all from the user interface just by the profile button, select your username, and then from this menu, you can click on the edit button to change your username, your name, any of your details, your default view. Any of those personal preferences can be made on your own user account. You can also change your own password from this page. So typically what I like doing, I will use the forgot password to send an email to my account and change it from that link. However, you can do it from here. Again, profile button, username, and then from this edit action menu, the drop down here, you can click on password, and that will open up the field to change your own password. And then finally, because I'm a logged in user, I do have the ability to look at personal bookmarks as well, and those are managed from the drop down and bookmarks. And those are all of my personal bookmarks, all 0 of them. So I guess as an example, let's make a personal bookmark. Now that I'm logged in as a user, I can add personal or shared bookmarks. Those options weren't there before when I was not logged in. So let's say I want to have a bookmark that goes right to this particular page. I like the way that this looks. I like this view. I'm going to add, a radar layer. We're going to set this up so that anytime I open this bookmark, it's going to pull this view. So we've got that. And actually the map is not a great example for that. So I'm going to switch my example. I'm very sorry. We're going to switch to a particular site instead. So let's say I want to look at the one rain weather station that we have, and I want to always see this main view. I want easy access to just the one rain weather station. So from bookmarks, now that I'm on this page, I can click either if I want a shared bookmark or a personal. I just want to have this for this account. So we'll do personal here. And now by clicking on that, that includes the URL from the page we were just at. I can give it a name. I can give it a description. I'm just going to use the same thing. And then the target describes where do we want the link to open in. A new window, the same window. I'll do a new window. So if I click save, it says success, I added a bookmark. And when I open that, we'll now see the personal bookmarks listed on top and the shared in the menu below. So that really concludes what I have for today's webinar on Contrail user basics. I'll take this time, open up for questions. I'll stay online for just a few more minutes. I do want to plug our next webinar, which is going to be coming up on March. We can find details about that webinar at onerain.com. And then let's transfer that all over, wait for the page to load, and we can go to support, upcoming live webinars, and find the list of upcoming live webinars there, as well as the registration links. So next month, we've actually got 2 coming up. We're going to have a special webinar coming up on Wednesday, March 10th. You can see some information about that here. And that's going to be a walkthrough of our new Lightning weather services. This is an add-on functionality in Contrail. This is powered by our sister company, Earth Networks, and it enables the addition of lightning map layers and other details about lightning that can be brought in using Earth Networks Total Lightning Network. So I definitely recommend tuning into this one. That will be on March 10th at 10 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Mountain, noon Central, 1 p.m. Eastern, same time period as we always do for the webinars. And then the following week on Thursday, March 18th, will be our standard Contrail training webinar. And this one will be doing dashboards. This is when we're going to be talking about creating custom dashboards and real-time widgets. We'll have examples of some of our new widgets, as well as go over some of those existing examples that we have. So I want to say thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate your time and attention, and we will talk to you soon.